again. Welcome back to Shop Talk for our final talk of the fair. We are delighted to be welcoming Rachel Peterman to the stage. Rachel is the founder of Carousel Co, which is a retail and wholesale consultancy. Rachel has 10 years experience in the luxury goods industry and has worked with brands including Gucci, Bloomingdale's, Michael Kors and Coach. The topic of her talk is how to grow and compete on a limited budget, which I think is something we'd all love to know more about. So please give a warm welcome to Rachel Peterman.
Hello, hi, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. While this is more retail based, you can definitely, if you are a brand owner as well, apply a lot of the same concepts. So I really think it's just a way to think about your business in total. So just a bit about me. Thanks for the introduction. So in the last 10 years, I have worked either directly for or directly with the companies here. Last year, a little closer, sorry. So up until most recently last year, I was running watches and jewelry for Gucci for emerging markets in Europe. But I decided that there was a real lack of information for independent retailers and brands. So I wanted to start my own agency so I can bring a lot of the tricks and tools that the big guys have and help out smaller businesses. So the main points that these big high street and luxury retailers are doing is they're running smarter stock. They're doing a lot of analytics that I think the smaller businesses don't get a chance to do. And so here's the main points that I'd like to review with you guys so you get a better idea of how you can apply some of the same concepts. So the first thing is strong sales and inventory management. This costs nothing to do really, some good, deep analytics to understand what's really working. With that, you figure out how to have a more balanced assortment. We'll also discuss a bit about customer loyalty, about brand relationships. I think a lot of times you, as a retailer, you have your brand relationships, but there's so much more you can be doing together to make it more mutually beneficial. And then lastly, we'll talk a bit about compelling merchandise. So some of these concepts could seem very, very simple, that you definitely already know them, or some can seem like it's something completely new. So definitely at the end, please ask questions or come up and see me afterwards and I can go into a bit more detail. So the first thing that we will talk about is how to run smarter stock. I think we all know that we set sales goals monthly. And we know overall we may want to do 10,000 for this month, but we really have to think about what does that 10,000 break down into? What specifically are those categories for that month that we're counting on doing the business for us? And do we have the inventory even to be able to achieve the goals that we've set? So I have some questions that I'd want you to really think about and make sure that you're asking yourself these routinely. How much stock do you need to achieve those sales goals? How quickly is my total stock turning? And how much stock should I own by brand, category, and product? And how much do I really have to spend on reorders this month? A lot of times I will hear from clients that I work with, they're not making their goals, they kind of shut down on reorders, but have they looked to even make sure, do they have enough stock to support the sales goals? So a very simple way of doing this could be very simple to some of you and to others it isn't, so don't worry. I like to perform a basic sales to stock analysis. So to give you an idea, this is from a children's clothing store during the last 3 months, so the last quarter of 2016. So as you can see, I like to look at the units, the sell-through pounds, what I actually have in stock, and obviously the stock value. So basically the main comparison you want to see is your sales matching up with the actual stock you own. So this is where you can see where am I overstocked so that I need to come up with a plan to deal with it in a smart way. Where am I understocked? What categories should I not be investing as much? So this gives you a good overall picture. The biggest call outs from this, just that I would see, is for instance, toddler girls. It's 13% or almost 14% of my sales. It's only 7% of my stock. So this would be an automatic alert to me that I want to think about, am I stocked too much in newborn, for instance? And do I want, when I'm coming up with my buy plan for the future, I want to buy a bit more in line with how the sell-through. Does that make sense? Okay. So I think after you do a basic analysis, as I had in the last slide, you then need to really think about a clear assortment strategy. So something I like to talk a lot about with independence is having a core base versus a fashion. This is also a way to save money because you are making an investment in things that you know will definitely work versus if most of your assortment is made up of just fashion or trending items, it's very tricky. But this is also a balance because a lot of your customers are coming to you because you have products that nobody else does. And so I get some pushback sometimes that, we always want one and done. We always want just the newness and we move on to something else. But that's tricky when you're on a limited budget. You want to make sure that at least half your stock, maybe, depending on your business model, maybe it's a little more, a little less, is something that you count as core, at least for 6 months to 1 year, so that you can make smarter choices in the inventory you buy for it. So, even when you think about Zara, for instance, so their whole thing is they are right off the runway. They have the runway looks within 10 days into their store. But even someone like that who's so trend driven, I believe it's like 25% is still basic stock of leggings, of socks, of something where your customers can know they can come in and day out to get. And this is just important when you don't have a huge open to buy. You want to make sure that you can, get the correct inventory for the year, and having a core assortment helps with this. At the same time, I like to really think about a seasonal product flow. So you come here and it is so exciting to see everything. There's such great products. You buy. But I like to also talk with the brands about having it be a bit more of a flow. So if you're buying now for the next 6 months, think about, well, what can I launch in 3 months? What is it then in 6 months? So you spread out a bit of the newness more. It's also important, we'll go over it a bit in the next one, just to really be tailoring some excitement throughout the year and not just at Christmas time, which I think a lot of stores tend to do. Also, you need to have a plan for your slow sellers. So I think having a good relationship either with your brands where you can do some swaps or exchanges is really helpful, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So when I say a clear assortment strategy, here's where I like to think about the product flow. There's obviously some that are much more, Valentine's Day. And if you are a gifting-based company, you want to be set up for that. But sometimes I think we miss some of the opportunities in between. For instance, late spring, I think if you can really tailor your products really for summer and seasonal goods and things that celebrate the outdoors and the weather, I think there's opportunities to add a bit of excitement throughout, not just in the major holidays that you see. So I really like this stat. You have a 5 to 20% probability of selling to a new customer, and it costs you a lot more to acquire a new customer. You have a 60 to 70% probability of selling to an existing customer. So this is where really getting your assortment down, really having your core things, they come day in and day out for you, and also applying a few other ideas we'll talk about in a minute is helpful and a lot more cost efficient. So some of these may be second nature to you and some not to others. But all of these things too, I always encourage you to partner with your brands as well. So, and if you're a brand sitting here, I encourage you to do the same with your retailers to help your stores, really have some more engagement and excitement. So the first thing is shopping events. I think, this is inviting your customer, your loyal customer base, to have, if it's before Christmas, it's to come and have drinks and you get 10% off on everything you buy that night. Just make sure you're really doing things to engage and get to know your existing customer base. I am such a fan of gift guides, and I don't think that this should just be something you print online or digitally, especially at big gift times of year. I always encourage stores that I work with to have, if someone walks in, you have something that shows, here's, one page, here are all of, our top sellers for the month. Here is, if it's at Christmas time, here is our, if it's a children's store, here's our recommendations for children between 0 and 3. When you go to a cereal aisle, I always say this, and there's so many different choices, even though they can all look amazing, you can feel overwhelmed and you end up leaving. So I think a lot of times in some of these amazing independent stores, there's so much choice, it can feel a little overwhelming. So any way that you can talk through some type of gift guide, or even if you're merchandising it in that way so it makes it more shoppable, it's really helpful and does not cost you much. The other thing I say is to partner with non-competing local businesses. So if we're talking about a shopping event, who else locally would be a good partner to be doing something with you on? So keeping your horizons outside of just, who you've been working with. There's a lot of good exchanges you can do that don't cost a lot of money. So I want to talk a bit about brand relationships. And as I said, this can work both ways. So there's a lot that I think your brands can do, and a lot that stores can do for brands that aren't often asked. Everybody is very busy, and I think sometimes as a small business, you don't feel like you get as much attention, especially if you carry some bigger brands. But to me, there's a lot that they can be helping you with. So when we talk about going over what's working and what's not from a sales and inventory perspective, this is where you can really partner with them. While it can't always work that they take back what isn't working, etc., you can go in and discuss, here's my problems, how can you help me? What can you do? And I think sometimes you don't ask the question, but they do have some opportunities. So something with the brands that I work with, that we do, is if we get consistent selling from a store every month, after 6 months, we will go to them and we will swap out, usually at a 1-to-2 ratio, but we want them turning. We don't want them to just be holding old stock. So it's partnering with them and seeing, how can they help. The other thing that's nice is when we're talking about shopping events and, really nice things to do for your customers, is there ways that you can have some of especially your smaller brands, come in for a Meet the Maker night? If there's something that they can do that they can personalize in your store, ask them to come in for a night. These are all things they want to help sales. For the most part, you don't end up paying them to do that, but we should be partnering. The other thing is, can they come in and do a training for your sales staff? Just ask the questions, and I think too many times we don't. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you do this, but to me, I think the most important thing is really figuring out how to tell a story with your merchandise. And while we don't all, one of these is anthropology, and while we don't have the anthropology budget for visuals, I think there's still creative ways. And you can also work with your brands on this too. So this is another place where it's worth asking the question. But to me, it's going to get harder and harder in retail. But part of why I think independents really have a shot is because it can be more personal and they can provide more of an experience. So I want you to think about that as you are doing your merchandising. How can I be telling a story? Because that's why they're choosing to shop with you versus Amazon or somewhere else. So I just have some examples of some storytelling that I really like. I mean, in some of these, that wouldn't cost very much, to just tell a little story and pull out with the cloud and the clothes. The other thing I really like here is you're telling the story, but you're also showing with different accessories that go along with the whole picture. So make sure that you're getting more out of each, each buy, because you're seeing, all of these add-ons that can work together. So again, the storytelling here, I really think is strong. Here's a little bit more when I talk about gift guides too. It's nice immediately, what is the store focused on right now? What really pops out to them? And I love how they end up doing this.